right, guys, welcome back to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. I am here today with a special guest. I think you are going to be maybe that guest number 3. So we're doing pretty much like guest month for the month of September.
Okay.
And I think you're going to be the 3rd one in a row. So today's guest is, I don't know whether to call you Fit with Lily.
Let's go Fit with Lily. I feel like people don't really know my last name.
Yeah.
Hello.
So Fit with Lily, welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I have been doing a lot of virtual podcasts and haven't done an in-person one like with someone else that's not Tori. So I'm so excited for this.
No, that's cool because we used to do so many virtuals and I just feel like content these days is just, it's better than that.
100%.
The virtuals are just like, the quality's not there.
It's
like,
a better connection as well.
Yeah, if you have to do them, they're fine. But I was like to G, let's just get in the car and drive down to Lily.
Yeah. And here we are.
Off we go.
Yeah.
So Lily is here today. I really just wanted you to come on and like share your story. I feel like you, and I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and get into it, but I feel like we talk so much about nutrition and training on the podcast, and we speak a lot about sort of the muscle gain process and the fat loss process, and we do a lot of like educational, factual episodes, like really explaining this stuff. And we run programs like that in Eat Like Ruby with the muscle gain phase and the fat loss phase and stuff. And I feel like you obviously live that on the next level.
Yeah.
As a like, do we call you a professional bikini competitor?
I sound like bodybuilder. It's the easiest way, yeah.
So I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, but I just thought it'd be cool to really break down your story and what it looks like to do that on that next level.
Okay, fun.
So tell us who you are.
I'm Lily. Hi, everyone. And basically, I am a competitive bodybuilder, if you want to call it that. I compete in bikini and have done 2 comps. So my last one was in April or like May this year. And then now I'm currently in my off season, pretty much growing as much as I can to compete next year. And then I also have a podcast with my best friend, Tori, and run an online coaching business, which is mainly focusing around lifestyle coaching. But I am now kind of going into more niching to comp prep coaching. So that is basically what I want to do, is coach girls to compete. So it's pretty much like myself in a rundown. Only moved here, I'm pretty sure it's a year ago now. I've been living on the Gold Coast.
It feels like forever. Like,
it really does.
Who's like followed you.
Yeah.
I feel like this has just been your life always.
I've lived like in so many different states as well. Like I've lived in Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide, back to Melbourne, then Gold Coast, and now I'm here to stay. Like I am not leaving. I love it.
No, that's cool. So I feel like I would love to talk about your bodybuilding and stuff, obviously, but I feel like I don't even know like where you kind of started.
Yeah.
And I would love to know your kind of like what your teenage and like early 20s, how old are you?
25.
Yeah, I thought so. So like what did nutrition and training and everything look like for you as a teenager and early 20s? Like did you kind of have that typical phase of dieting and like getting into gym and all the body image stuff? I'd love to kind of know where you started with that.
So essentially, just give you a little bit of backstory. I did cheerleading growing up, like very competitively. I traveled like overseas pretty much like 4 years in a row, competing at worlds and American nationals and things like that. So that was pretty much my life from like early high school to my first year of university. I was just like training cheer. Like that was what I lived and breathed.
Can I just ask, like, could you just, not that I'm going to get you to, but could you just do like a backflip right now?
I could.
G, are you listening to this? So G has this thing where she says to me all the time, if you could have one random skill, what would it be? And she asks me every 3rd day. And I'm like, G, you ask me this all the time. But she comes up with the most crazy stuff. And I always just say, I'd love to just be able to like do a flip. Like no one's
good party
expecting
trick.
it, and you're just like walking along the beach and you just do like a walkover or a flip or something. So you can do this.
Yes. Now, not as good as like what Tori can do. Like she can literally do everything. Because I don't really train it anymore, but I absolutely could like just do a backflip.
But do you feel like if you were to just do a backflip because you don't train it anymore, is it like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that?
No, I'm actually stronger now because of training.
Because of training.
Yeah, so I have so much more power behind me.
Oh my God.
Which is interesting. So that was me growing up. I did cheer and tumbling and all of those things. And basically that is where my journey started in towards like the gym and just like getting a lot more fit to compete and things like that. Now, through school, and I'm going to say year 12 was the main period where I definitely had a warped relationship with food. In the time, I didn't really see it myself, but I would literally eat so clean. I don't remember having like any takeaway food. There's no way I would have lollies. It was always brown rice over white rice. Like literally, if we went and got sushi and there was no brown rice, I just like wouldn't eat, which is insane to look back at, because at that time I just thought that I was being healthy and that's what I was training for. No one really told me otherwise. Everyone just like viewed me as like, oh no, she just eats healthy, she just looks after herself. But I like lost quite a bit of weight and got like really small. But again, no one really questioned it because we were training for Worlds, everyone was getting smaller.
Yeah.
And like
Did you feel like, was there pressure in your like team or anything to be skinny or smaller or anything?
I wouldn't say necessarily smaller, but you are training in like crop and shorts, and you're going to America where all the girls are tan, they're blonde, they have six packs. So you want to fit in. So like just subconsciously, that's what you do. And I think even our coaching, like I would say my coaches literally kind of helped me become the person I am today with like discipline and mindset. But the way that they navigated food back then, it was literally like carbs are not your friend.
Yeah.
So I definitely fell into that trap in my early teens. I just wasn't educated. But again, I feel like there wasn't that much education around those like, even like only 5 years ago, honestly.
Yeah.
Now it's really turned into like how to fuel yourself, especially as females. So like back then I just wasn't educated at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I feel like, well, maybe you a little bit because you're a bit younger than me, but I feel like at the time when you're a teenager, it's very much kind of like magazines or even just like Pinterest, like,
oh yeah,
how to be skinny, like, and then it's like do 10 sit-ups and then 10 squat jumps and like, you know, those weird sort of posts that used to be around Pinterest, and you're like, oh, that's what I have to do.
Literally. And it was like Victoria's Secret models. I remember this was like, years and years and years ago, probably like the very early stages of cheer. I didn't have a gym membership or anything while I trained because like cheerleading was like my training, but I would, when I was brushing my teeth, there would always be like a Pinterest workout that I would do. Like 10 star jumps, 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups. I'm like, what is that going to do? Nothing. But besides wire me up before I go to bed.
That is so funny.
Yeah. And I feel like we've all fallen into that trap at some point.
Yeah.
Searching the most random workouts, doing them, and actually it's not going to do anything at the end of the day. So yeah, we've all been there.
That's so funny.
Then once I finished cheer, I was kind of a little bit lost with my training because I started to go to the gym and I just wasn't really training for anything. So
when did you finish, like how old were you when you finished cheer?
18.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I decided, I woke up one day and said I'm going to train for a half marathon. So I signed myself up and that's what I did. I literally only ran like, I think I ran a 14K beforehand and I could comfortably run 10 and then I just did the 21 and it was fine. So that's what I did.
And you're like 18 at this time?
Yes, I was. Yeah. This was my first year out of school. So that's what I did. And then I moved to Adelaide. And I'm going to say that's where my relationship with food and the gym wasn't the best at all. I started to gain a little bit more weight, nothing noticeable at all. But for myself, I just wasn't as lean as what I normally did. I did F45, didn't train at the gym at all. I wasn't really running. I literally would eat like either a whole block of chocolate in one night and then try and restrict for 3 days. I was fell into that trap where it was like the all or nothing mindset approach, and I couldn't have a row of chocolate without feeling like I had to finish the whole block, or I couldn't just have like a burger without feeling like, okay, I have to have dessert and I'll start fresh tomorrow.
Yeah,
and I feel like we've all fallen into that trap here and there. And it definitely took some time to come out of, but the biggest thing for me was hiring a coach, and that literally changed my world in terms of the gym.
Yeah. So when you hired a coach, when you very first hired a coach, were you thinking bodybuilding, or were you more just like, I want to get in shape, I want to learn?
It was actually, I went straight into bodybuilding. So I was like, I came back to Melbourne and it was starting like through COVID, and I started to get more and more into the gym, and a coach actually came up to me and said like, you'd be the perfect candidate, essentially, basically poaching me because he wants more clients, of course. Like, not really the perfect candidate. Like, I'm not really lifting heavy, don't know how to train
me every
exactly,
week.
Right? So I actually did sign up with him, and we kind of got the ball rolling. And then I eventually moved, like as I got serious, I eventually moved to a girl coach who is still my coach now, Beck Cameron, and I absolutely love her. And then I just kind of went from there straight into a growing phase. And that growing phase.
Did you compete with that first coach?
No. Yeah. I was only with him for like, honestly, a few months. And then...
So I feel like you were like you realised, fuck, I love this.
Yes.
And then you're like, I want to find the right
and I want to take it seriously. Yes, that is correct. Yeah. And I moved gyms and things like that. And I wanted a girl that was like focused on female hormones because I knew that it wasn't exactly healthy. And I also knew that Beck kind of really narrows down into hormone health. And that's something that was really important to me. Even now is like competing to make sure my body is as healthy as it can be. So I went with her and then, I headed literally straight into a growing phase for 6 months before I started prep.
That's even so cool because I feel like a lot of people, maybe not so much these days, but I feel like when competing first got popular, people just kind of got caught up in the hype of like the pictures and everything on social media and went into like crazy strict preps. And, people were like, I might compete. And then 12 weeks later, they're on stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, you haven't really built a body.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you did like to do the growing phase first is awesome.
So important. Like anyone that even comes to me who says they want to compete, I'm like, cool, we're going to compete end of next year. You have to prove that, like, you have to even prove to yourself and to me that you can stick to your diet, you can train with intensity, you can build muscle mass, or else you're not going to get the result that you want. Your prep's actually going to be a million times harder. Your body's not going to respond correctly because you haven't built up those calories, you haven't built up your metabolism, your training intensity, and you're not going to end up with a package that you think that you want.
Yeah, like you're not going to have the physique under there. Like you're going to diet down and there's not going to be much there.
If you start your prep on 2,200 calories, like that's your surplus, good luck to you. Like you're going to have to get low to make sure you don't hit plateau. So yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. And so when did you first compete? What year was that?
2022. Yes, 2022.
Yeah.
End of 2022. Then I had a year off. I went to Europe, travelled, moved states, and then I competed start of this year.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So I feel like with your first comp, you did really well.
Yeah, I did.
How well did you do?
I won my bikini pro card for the Natural Federation, which is insane in my first season.
As you do on day one.
Yeah. So I also did 3 other comps before that. It was literally 5 weeks and I competed 4 out of those 5 weekends. And I said to myself, I would never do that again. Yeah. It was full on, but my body was in a fine place to be able to do back-to-back comps. And I, placed in pretty much everything that I did and then won in the end, which is insane.
That's so cool. So if we think about going into that growing phase, like the very first one before you'd competed or anything, when your coach sort of said that to you, did you ask to do that? Did she suggest that?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
She was like, this is what we're doing. If you want to compete, you have to enter a growing phase. I also kind of knew, just from watching other people's experience, that you do have to build muscle. You do have to put your calories up, but I literally had no choice. If I wanted to compete, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And of course, there was times where I felt uncomfortable, but I also feel like I was very oblivious. I wasn't really sure. I was just doing what she said with no education. And even looking back now, I was like, wow, I really didn't know, because how I treated my first growing phase to my second one, entirely different. And even going to this third one, I'm treating it different again. My first one, I would just eat basically as many calories as I could. And yes, I'd still hit my targets, but I would get takeaway constantly. I would fill it up through chocolate and things like that. And yeah, you're going to hit your targets, but you're not actually going to fuel your body correctly and it's not going to utilize that food in the way that it needs to. Then the second time, I was able to really focus on nourishing myself at the same time. And that made the biggest difference.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a typical thing. I think when people first get into flexible dieting and tracking and being like, oh, I can literally include anything. I feel like everyone has that phase.
Absolutely.
Fucking Cocoa Pops and then takeaway and pancakes and and it's no veggies, no nothing.
Oh, literally the first time I went to growing phase, I literally did not have vegetables. I think sometimes I'd go a week and a half. I'm like, when was the last time I had a green? I'm like, okay, stir fry. Let's put something in there.
Just one stir fry a fortnight. Take off the veg.
Literally.
No, I feel like that's so common, but I think it's such a common thing, even if people aren't competing, just getting into flexible dieting and getting their head around everything. I think you go through that phase of oh my God, I can literally include anything. Why the fuck would I eat veggies? Yeah. And then you do get to a point where I feel like the novelty of that kind of wears off and you really find that sweet spot of I can have the fun things as part of the day, but I do feel significantly better. I do train significantly
1000%.
better. I recover significantly better with all those things. And even digestion, skin, hormone health, you said.
You don't feel as inflamed either.
Yeah.
When you're eating constant takeout with a lot of salt in it, you just constantly feel inflamed and bloated. And then this time growing phase, people are like, oh, do you feel bloated all the time? I'm like, not once.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah, because of the foods that you eat and makes the biggest difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So when you went into that first growing phase, did you have any sort of apprehension of fuck, a growing phase or high calories? Like, am I going to feel uncomfortable? Am I going to gain weight?
You know what's really interesting? I think the first time, no. The second time, yes.
Yeah, really?
The first time I was in a relationship and like I was like, oh, it's like so fine. I wasn't feeling like I had to prove myself to anyone. Not that you ever should, but nothing really crossed my mind in that matter. I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And I know I'm competing, like I'm starting prep in like 3 months and I've got 12 more weeks to push. It's fine, whatever. Had never really seen myself in a like deep deficit, but equally never really been in a growing phase. So I wasn't sure. So I just kind of like did the thing without much thought around it.
Yeah.
Then the second one, that is probably when a lot more thoughts came up because I had recently broke up with my partner. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm not as confident in myself anymore. And that's when like those thoughts did start to come up. But it was only now and then, honestly. You're still going to have those days where you don't feel 100%. Even like in a deficit phase when you were super lean, you still have those days where you don't feel great. So it's really just like taking that on board and knowing that what you are doing is like for a reason. And even like throughout this phase, there's still times right now I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling 100%, but I don't give it too much thought about it. I just like carry on with the rest of my day because I have that goal there and know what I need to do to achieve it.
Yeah, that's so true. And we've spoken about that heaps on the podcast lately because someone said, I had a Q&A the other week and someone said like, I can't remember how they worded it. I think they were saying like, have I had phases where I have to eat more than my husband or something like that?
Yep.
Like do you feel weird if you're eating more than him or whatever? And pretty much exactly like what you just said, I was saying on there, like when you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and there's intention and there's reason behind it or whatever, there's not a lot of emotion or confusion or anything. Like it just makes so much sense. You're like, no, but I know exactly what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what the plan is, etc. And someone even asked in a similar way, because my husband trains for like triathlon, Ironman and all that, and everyone was like, oh, do you feel like you see him training way more than you? Do you feel like you should be training more? Do you question it? And that was such an interesting question for me because I'm like, no, never, because my training is so intentional. It makes so much sense.
Yes.
So it's even sort of similar, I would say, with you, like living with Tori and Jackson and you guys all do different sports, different activities or whatever, but you know exactly what you're working towards. So you would never look at, you know, if Tori said, I'm going for a run, you wouldn't be like, fuck, should I be going for a run?
Yeah.
Because you're like, no, I shouldn't. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, literally. That is a very, very good point you bring up because if you go into a dieting phase, comp prep, growing phase with no real goal behind it and you're just doing it for the sake of it because your friend's doing it or someone told you to, you're not actually going to be adherent. You're not going to want to do it for very long at all because there is no goal behind it. Going to a growing phase, the biggest thing that helps me is having an end date.
Yeah.
Now it's not like, let's say March 27th next year, I'm done. It's just like
so funny because I say that all the time. I'm like, guys, you want to lose plan and you don't have to lock in the dates.
Yes.
But like,
it's like even sometimes I have clients come up to me and they're like, so what will my Kel's be in 15 weeks time? I'm like, okay, let's focus on tomorrow and then we'll reassess later. Like I literally can't tell you. But that definitely helps me so much because if you're going into a growing phase and it's like, well, this is what it is for the next like who knows how long, it can be really hard mentally. But when you know there's a rough end date, you're like, okay, 12 more weeks to push, 8 more weeks to push, around about. It just helps you so much with that plan, knowing how much to hold and how much to push. So that is my biggest recommendation. If you're not 100% confident going into a growing phase, because it can be hard, have that end date and know like your reasoning behind why you are doing something.
Yeah. And I think I'd love to talk about like your sort of specific numbers. So in terms of like comp physique, comp weight compared to like growing phase weight, what does that look like?
So I stepped on stage, I think 52 kilos. My lowest was like 51 in prep because obviously like you carb up. Currently 7 kilos up at 58.
Yeah.
And then I know my max weight I've gotten to in a growing phase is 62. So I'm 4 kilos off that.
Yeah, right. So probably about 10 kilos from gaining to competing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure both times was like nearly exactly 10 kilos. And I feel like this time is going to be a little bit more because I do have a lot more muscle density behind me. So that weight will be, of course, higher.
Yeah. I feel like this is so cool because I talk about all this stuff with myself, but then you're, like I said, you're on that like next level of competing, which is just so cool. But I feel like that's even interesting because I think a lot of people hear that and go, oh, like 62 is still so fucking light.
Yeah.
And whatever. But I always say, because my numbers are quite similar, like my sort of gaining weight is around 68 and then shredded is around like 58. And again, I think a lot of people hear that and go like, oh, 68 is like not even that heavy or whatever. But I always say to people, like, you're essentially looking, if you're a 60 kilo person who puts on 6 kilos, that's 10% of your body weight.
Yep.
And then even if we think about those numbers we just said, we're probably putting on closer to 15. So if you think about a person who's 80 or 90 kilos, like if you think about a person who's 80 kilos, that's like them becoming 90, 95.
Yeah.
So I think people hear those numbers and they think like, oh, does it really matter because you're always tiny?
People always also say like, do you have a specific weight you're getting to? Like, what is like your goal weight? And like, bodybuilding has nothing to do with weight at the end of the day. Like, it literally has to do with how you look. That scale number does not mean anything.
Preaching everything that I preach. Yeah.
Like, I don't, people are like, oh, what weight are you getting to my growing phase? I don't know and I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, all you want to know is that it is increasing because that means you're in a growing phase. Same as a deficit phase. I don't know when I'm going to step on stage at. It's going to be a rough estimate. I just know that naturally I have to lose 500 grams a week in prep to kind of have that average.
To end up like, and it's not so much about you're like, oh, I need to step on stage at 52, but you know now having competed, that's where your sort of lean, shredded physique is. And like you said, if you go through a whole gaining phase now, compete again, you might compete next time at 53. But you're like, I fucking got way bigger glutes and delts.
Yes.
So that's the point. So that's so cool to think about. If we think about your calories or talk about your calories in a gaining phase, what does that look like?
So my highest has been 3,000 and I'm currently sitting at 2,900 and we have a fair few months to go. So I feel like they're going to get a lot higher this time. But this is also something that is going to be so relative to each person. Yeah. The more muscle mass you have, the more calories you're naturally going to burn, right? Then also the more food you eat, the harder you train with intensity, you're going to burn more energy, so you're going to need more calories. The more you go through growing phase, I actually had this question the other day and they said, do you think that a person who has gone through like, let's say their third growing phase is naturally going to look leaner than someone who is in their first growing phase? 100%. Yeah. Because you have that muscle density behind you and your shape is just completely different. So if you look at my first growing phase to now, my body composition is entirely different, but I weigh the exact same. Like the exact same.
And that's so cool.
Yeah. And I was almost eating, like at that time, I'm eating the exact same as I am now. So I'm eating the exact same. My weight's the exact same. I look entirely different because time and like patience and just putting the energy into the gym and consistency. So it's just like, you can't expect your first growing phase to be like muscle mummy, be all and all like shredded. It's not how it works, but you've got to like trust the process and just like keep pushing that food up. But yeah, I'm currently at 2,900 and it is very easy for me to eat that much. I don't know how people always say like, oh no, I can't eat more than 2,200. I'm like, yes, you can.
No, yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah. It's a mental game. Yeah.
That's so cool. And so so you've not long competed. When did you compete?
May.
Yeah. And so you've sort of eased back into this gaining phase kind of.
Yeah, I had like a recovery/reverse diet for, oh God, it was like 8 weeks and my body like really wasn't putting on like much weight at all. Well, increasing calories quite a bit, got my wisdom teeth out, then I got back to stage weight, which was not ideal at all. I got really small and then I went to Thailand, didn't track food and I like tried to eat so much. I came back like lighter again. I'm like, oh my God. So then we decided to like go for it and we have like, bumped them up and I've gained like now like 4 kilos in a month.
Yeah, wow.
Which is a lot.
Like, okay, I'm in the surplus.
Yeah, now we're like, we're on now. Yeah.
And so when is competing again on the cards?
Yep. So either June, July next year or October. I'm not sure if I'm doing season B or season C. It's going to depend how I look, things that come up. Yeah. Season B would be, there's IFBB is like a non-tested federation. Mm-hmm. So essentially people can take performance enhancing drugs. I'm still a natural athlete and they're bringing in a competition next year, which is basically in the middle of the year. I'm pretty sure it's confirmed, but not with details, that basically it's still under IFBB, but it's a natural federation. You can win your pro card. So that is like very on the cards for me. It's just meaning I have to start prep like Feb. So yeah, it's going to see how I am looking and things like that. Or
otherwise push it out a bit.
Push it out to CC because I want to compete overseas next year as well. So it depends when show dates line up.
Where do you want
Yes.
to compete? America?
Japan or South Korea?
Oh.
So again, it depends on how you look in your physique because each country does judge things quite differently. It's very, very subjective. And Japan and South Korea are more my physique.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
How interesting.
I know.
Go Lily.
I'm very excited.
This is cool. So that's even a cool thing to speak about because I think competing is such a different sport in terms of, like, if you were training for a running race, it's literally you cross the line first, you're the winner.
Yes.
Right? If you're training for a bikini competition, it completely depends on who you're standing next to. Like, you could have fantastic glutes, but then the person next to you has even more fantastic glutes and suddenly yours don't look so good.
Yep.
And then you've got a judge there that's potentially like, no, I don't like big glutes.
Yeah.
So it's such a subjective sport. So how do you feel in terms of, like, if you go into prep and say, like, the comps that you recently did, are you kind of thinking in terms of, I'd love to place, I'd love to win, or is it more like, I'd love to present this sort of package?
Yeah.
Like, how do you go with that?
I think you'd be lying if you said to yourself, like, you go into comp and you don't care about placings. Like, if you're a naturally competitive person, you're going in to win.
Yeah.
And then if you
I
don't
love
go
that
in...
you've said that because I feel like most people would just be like, no, it's just about me.
Yeah, well,
Just wanna feel
like,
my best.
sorry, I'm going in and I'm going to win. Like,
Like,
if
I'm
you...
not fucking doing this.
Yeah, if
for
you
fun.
don't have that intent, like, yes, there's so much you want to, like, be your old package and things like that. But when you train, you've got to train to be, like, wanting to win. And then also take a step back from that. You have to know that you are doing everything you can and you're bringing your best package. So it's like definitely 2 cents. I think going into the end of the day, it is like, okay, as long as I know I've beaten my best package, that's all that matters. But equally, I still want to place and I still want to do well. So I set goals for myself in terms of placing standards this year, which was like very nerve-wracking because if you don't achieve them, then you feel like, what was the point? Or you almost feel like a failure because you didn't meet your expectations. So I was also managing that to not go too much in terms of, like, it was my first time competing, but then you don't want to, like, what's the word? Like, not be like, oh, I just want to get
play
first.
it too safe.
Yeah, play it too safe because then you're only going to reach that level. So then you're going to train to play it safe. You're going to train to get first call outs, not first place. So I find if I set myself a goal that is, like, quite high, I am way more likely to train hard to do everything I can to achieve that goal because I know that, like, whatever I do, I am going to beat my old self because that's just what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. So when you competed this year, what was the goal?
My goal was to place in my first 2 divisions and in open class. So basically open class is people have been competing for however long. There's, like, no criteria really to it, was to get first call outs, which basically means you get, like, the top 5, 6, depending how many in your class, that you get the top, like, placings. They call you out first.
Yep.
So I did achieve, like, all that. I got first call outs and placed in my first 2 divisions. So I did what I wanted to do, which is awesome. So yeah.
I love it. In terms of, so we spoke about gaining calories being around 3,000. What is, like, the lowest deficits peak calories look like?
I don't know why, but I've literally forgotten the exact number. I do know that majority, like, for weeks on weeks on weeks, the last, like, I'm going to say 2 months of prep, I was on, like, 1,400. Now, that is actually not low at all for competing. I know a lot of girls who will be dieting on, like, 1,200. That is more so, like, I'm not going to say the norm because everyone is so different, but 1,400 wasn't as much of a push as some people.
Yep.
And my cardio was 5 times a week, 30 minutes on the stairs. And I know a lot of girls are doing an hour for 6 days a week. But this is where it's, like, so relative, right?
Yeah.
I did compare myself at the end. I'm like, okay, why am I complaining when girls' calories are lower, girls' cardio is higher? But my coach was like, okay, but when you really take a step back, you're stage ready. So you're holding that depleted state for so much longer. Your metabolism's faster. So it doesn't make it any different at all. It's like a guy will diet, like, the last week's on prep on 2,500. Does that mean they can't complain that they're hungry? Like, no.
Like, it's hungry to them.
Yeah, and they're also burning through so many more calories because they have a lot more muscle mass, and that's what, like, their calories probably got to 5,000 in off season. So that's, like, half their intake, exact same as me. Like, 3,000, half my intake's 1,500. So it is so relative, and you've really got to stay in your own lane. But I was ready quite early for this time. So I pulled cardio, I think it was 4 weeks before I competed. I stopped all cardio and didn't do it again.
Yeah. So one thing I want to touch on there, because I think we work predominantly in Eat Like Ruby, like we don't do comp prep or anything like that. So we like doing a lot of lifestyle stuff. And I feel like anytime we see that sort of 14 to 1500 intake come up, that's where people start to be like, fuck, this is hard. This is tricky, whatever. Like it's a bit of a grind when people start to get down on that. And I think it's so important to really point out, because I think it's very easy to see people like yourself on social media with like a next level physique, especially comp day. It's like, it's insane. And I think we sort of see that, and then maybe especially like younger people kind of look at that and they're like, I want to look like Lily. I want this, I want that. And if you think about like sort of what's coming to my mind is, you know, people are struggling on 1500 calories. And then like you said, we've got like people struggle on 1,500 calories with 9,000 steps a day and 3 gym sessions a week. And then I think it's just important to point out that like to reach that like peak extremely in shape physique, like you said, you're talking 1,200 calories, an hour of cardio a day. And I think what we didn't even point out there, for most people, it's like an hour of cardio a day and then a crazy high step target as well.
And then training for an hour and a bit on top of that. Then
like
you've got a pose.
And then cardio and then steps.
Yeah. I think the other thing to notice here is like when just a lifestyle client is in a deficit phase, they're like, oh, I've got an event on Saturday night. I'll like bank calories fat. There is no banking calories. Like
there's no event.
There is no event.
There's taking my Tupperware to my event.
Exactly, right? So you don't even have those like mini days where it's almost like that quick metabolism boost or that quick burst of energy. Like you're depleting and you don't, like, you can't change a plan just because of how you feel. Now, yes, you will have like diet breaks here and there, but honestly, they don't come around very often.
But it's not like, oh, it's Sally's birthday, we're going out for pizza.
Right?
Like,
it's you get an extra 20 grams of rice and a banana. Like, it's nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's just so important to point out, because I think with social media these days, it's so easy to see someone with an insane rig or they're in awesome shape or whatever, and it's almost like, why can't I look like that? And it's like, are we doing the things this person is doing? And like you're saying, for 5 months on end, like that is next level.
Yeah.
What is your, if we look at like training and then like you said, half an hour of cardio, and then did you have a step target as well?
12,500.
Yeah. So that's a huge lifestyle commitment when we think about gym, like resistance training, then cardio, then steps, and then like you said, everything is weighed, tracked, measured, like.
Yeah, it is like your whole entire life. Especially, I always say the second half of prep is completely different to the first half. The first half, you still have energy. Your calories are probably still like over 2,000. There's not as much cardio. It just feels like you're doing everything that you normally would do, but just like to the T. The second half, that is when you really start to push energy.
When you say second half, like how long?
I say like 10 weeks out. Yeah. So it's like 20, or it can range to like 25 weeks plus, but let's say 25 weeks to 10 weeks. You're pretty relative. Under 10 weeks, you're now starting to push.
Grinding.
Yeah, right? And that is a long time. Like, that's almost like 6 months completely in prep. So the second half, I really scaled back my business. So there was no onboarding clients. There was nothing like that. I just did not have the capacity to, and I really wanted to make sure I was still providing the highest service I could to my current clients. So I didn't take anyone else on board there. Tori was handling a lot with the podcast. Like I just straight up, if I tried as much as I could, and we definitely had those conversations to be like, okay, you organize this, I'll do this. And then social events, I stopped doing things. So I would say no to a lot more. I would like be a lot more strict on my routine, and I definitely started to isolate myself. But you just have to. Like, you can do as much as you can to a point, and then you've got to start to put yourself first and be selfish with a lot of things.
And that really, I think that's really where that next level thing comes in.
Yes.
Because like you said, you work with lifestyle clients, or you have in the past, and I do as well. And we teach the whole, you know, you can flexible diet and you can eat out and you can this and you can that. But you really do hit that level where you're doing something like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You do have to take, and I always say to people, like, we talk about this in Eat Like Ruby so much, where if the expectation is up here, the habits and the effort and everything has to be up here as well.
Yep.
And if you want to have a time in your life where habits and effort and everything come down, the expectation has to come down as well.
Yes, like, that's a very good way to put it.
Has to match up.
Yeah.
And I think it's so common these days to be like, you know, I want to lose weight, or I want to look like Lily, or I want whatever. are you doing what Lily's doing? Are you doing what these people are doing? And I think it's just cool to bring awareness to that. And the number one saying in Eat Like Ruby is there's no right or wrong. If someone says to me like, I want to go off on a holiday, fuck tracking food for 3 weeks. Or like, you know, I'm having a whole 4 months off. I'm doing whatever. Like, do what you want.
Yeah.
But I always want people to be really understanding of what is required to achieve any goal at any time. And
it's
are
so
you meeting the level of
interesting working with clients because obviously like we do very similar things and just realizing how much people don't understand how much it takes. So it's like, I've been on my diet for 2 weeks. Okay. So let's add an extra 12 weeks onto that and then we'll start to see results, right? People literally think just because they've been on for like 2 weeks with still one untracked meal that week, things are going to change. I'm like, honestly, always something that is a surprise to a lot of people. The first 4 weeks of my prep, or first half of my prep actually, my body doesn't respond. Like nothing moves. Weight does not go down. Beck, even last comp was like, what's happening? Are we hitting targets? Are we hitting protocols? I'm like, we both know that I'm doing everything. I just know it takes so long. Then it gets to a point where my body doesn't stop progress and I have to really take it back.
We are so similar in that sense. I spoke about that a while ago with myself. I'm like, the first 4 weeks, I don't even really...
There's no change.
Think about to me, it's like tick the boxes, do the actions because the weight's not really going to move that much.
Yep.
Like it's quite slow. And then same thing, I feel like once you get deep into that deficit, your body's just like, all right, I'm here, let's go.
Yes, 100%.
But it does take a while to get in there. So I think
people don't realize.
No, that's so important to point out. And something that came to my mind when you were saying all that is, I would love to know if do you find any sort of struggle with coaching clients when you're obviously on that next level? Like, do you get clients that are sort of comparing themselves to you or watching your progress and sort of saying like, why aren't I looking like you or progressing like you? Or
haven't had any clients say that. I've had a lot being like, they almost use it as like motivation. And I think
I love that.
They really utilize like what I'm doing and take it on board to themselves. But interesting enough, I almost have the opposite effect. I have like girls come to me like, I want to train hard to eat, like lose weight, but I don't want to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think they come with the expectation knowing that like, okay, that is the step above. Like I know that is unrealistic. Let's take it back like a notch. And this is what I want to achieve, which is cool because I'm surprised that I actually haven't had that. It's like very much the opposite. Like I want to do kind of what you want to do, but like let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool because that was something like, because I personally went into my fat loss phase at the same time we started the Eat Like Ruby fat loss phase and I was so nervous because I was like, I don't want people to compare to me. And especially if you think about everything that you said before, where if you've done, like if you're really conditioned to this, you've got big training history. And even if you like know your deficit, if you think about a brand new client, it often takes weeks to even just find this person's like, where is your maintenance? Where is your deficit or whatever? So when we think about ourselves, when we've done this a bunch of times, you know sort of where to go straight away on day one. When you've got a brand new person, there is that initial trial and error phase.
Yep.
And again, I think people just have to really be aware of that and be understanding of that. Like if it is day one, you're not going to get the same results as someone that's 5 years in.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's actually something I do have a conversation with. They will compare themselves to other girls on social media. Be like, they started a fat loss phase. They're in a growing phase. Why they're growing more muscle than me? I'm like, this is probably their 5th one. Or they've been doing it for 5 years. Like, you really don't know the reasoning like behind it. And even like this time competing, people are like, oh my gosh, like you did so well for your first time. I'm like, this is actually my 2nd time and this is actually my 3rd growing phase. Like, it's nothing new here. Like, I've been doing it before. The training intensity so much more. Like people just don't realize that their chapter 1 is literally someone else's chapter 20. So it's really staying in your own lane. I'm just gonna like divert the conversation for a second. And when it comes to competing, you have to stay in your own lane because equally you can compare your protocols, your physique transformation so much to other people, especially social media these days, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone says, I don't know, like I just know the bodybuilding industry, everyone says everything online. Like you literally have access to everyone's information. So you're going to compare yours to someone else's.
Yeah.
Exact same for lifestyle classes, clients. They're going to compare their protocols to someone else's. Your body is so entirely different. And I really love this story I'm about to say because my other friend, Caitlin, she competed like when we did our first season the same day as me. And she also got her pro card for like the tall class. Our protocols have never been so different in our whole entire life. The day before, I think she had like 60 or 80 grams of carbs. And normally you carb up before, right? So you're having like, you're in a depleted state 3 days before you compete. Your carbs are quite high to fill out your muscles so you don't look like a skinny little chicken. And you want to like come on stage like with muscles
like
pumped, essentially. Yeah. So Caitlin's coach the day before told her to stop eating carbs for the day. She was like, oh, you're filling out really quickly. We're cutting carbs. My coach said, you're not filling out. Let's increase. I was eating 400 grams of carbs. That is such a big difference. And I freaked out. I literally said to my coach, I'm like, this is what's happening. My friend just stopped carbs.
Friend's not eating any.
Yeah. And I was like, are you sure? It's my first time competing, so I didn't know. I'm like, are you sure? And she was like, Lily, trust me. She's like, you have your body just like chews through it. It's not like staying in your muscles. You need this. We both went on stage and bought our best physiques and both got our pro cards with completely different protocols. It's going to be the exact same for lifestyle clients, right?
Yeah.
Just because someone is dieting on like, I don't know, 2,000 calories and you're dieting on 1,500 calories doesn't mean that you're both not making progress. Like you can't compare your journey to someone else's.
100%. And I talk about that heaps in it, like Ruby, because even, when people sort of come in and they'll say something like, if someone said like, oh, I'm on 1,500 calories, someone else will go, oh, that seems low. Well, low to who and low compared to what? Maybe low compared to you if you do 20,000 steps a day because you're a waitress.
Are you a sports teacher or you're an accountant sitting at a desk?
Literally.
Two entirely different things.
Yeah. And I've had clients before that are naturally really petite, sedentary job, short, all of these things. And it's like, if you want to get that little bit of fat loss that you want to get, we're looking at 1,300 or 1,400 calories. Yeah. And then at the same time, like you said, you get a waitress that's training 5 times a week and she's got a lot of muscle mass, you might be getting fat loss on 1,900 calories. Yeah. Huge difference. And people sort of see that straight away and go, oh, yours are low and yours are high. And then like you said, hers are more than mine and hers are less than mine and whatever. But there's so many factors that are going to make that up.
Yeah.
And you kind of see like one factor about someone and then you're like, they're doing it different to me.
Yeah, you're taking it, run with it.
So many things playing out there. Yeah, that's crazy.
I know.
One thing that I wanted to talk to you about as well, and this is so random, but I saw this on your social media one time and I wanted to speak about it in more detail. You have fantastic glutes.
Thank you so much.
And I feel like everybody wants fantastic glutes. And I remember seeing a post of yours or a story of yours one time where you said you scaled your hip thrust weight right back to focus on technique, time under tension, all of these things.
Yes.
And I would love to just talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think there is such a big fixation these days, obviously on the glutes and then on the hip thrust, and then people kind of forming that connection of the heavier I can hip thrust, the better it's going to be.
I swear, I used to do like 1 RM hip thrust. That is not going to do anything for you. Like I would literally put 200 kilos on the bar and like just do like a few reps with the worst form. Now you're
just like whole body reefing it up.
Literally, you'd be lucky if I'm doing over 120 these days. Like I just don't do over that weight unless I'm like end of my growing phase, eating a lot of food, feeling a lot stronger than like naturally you're going to increase the weight. Most of the time, hip thrust is one exercise I will not go heavy. I will just slow down that movement. God, like my sets are so long and you're probably thinking, what is this girl doing? Because my tempo is like
Get
insane.
Out of the Smith machine, hurry up.
Literally, it's so slow, but it makes the world of difference because your glute contraction is next level and you can really focus on just utilizing your glutes at a lighter weight. When you chuck on all the weight, your glutes can't lift that. So your quads are coming into play. Your lower back muscles are coming into play.
Your
Everything
whole body's
else is
just getting behind it.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
So when you really strip back the weight, you can focus on that mind to muscle engagement. Now, this is where I think training experience comes into play because a lot of people think that like, okay, I'm going to strip the weight back and do 60 kilos and they can do it so easily, right? So it's kind of like finding that balance. And this is actually probably one of the hardest things my clients are finding. They're like, I don't know when to up the weight, when to strip it back, when to hold it. At the end of the day, you want your training intensity to still be high, right? It still needs to be hard, but equally not so hard that you feel like you are finishing the reps with your whole entire body.
Yeah.
Slow it down and just like really focus on mind to muscle connection.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What does your training split look like?
Okay, it is so like stock standard. It is like 3 to 4 sets, 10 to 12 reps, and then I will do, so I'll just like go through it 5 days a week, 2 complete rest days. I do glutes and hamstrings, delts, and like 1 chest exercise, full lower body, which is basically glutes and hammies. Then I'll do full upper, again, which is like back day, and then posterior. So for my like physique, we really want to focus on specific muscle groups, right? So I don't train triceps or biceps. I literally have no bicep muscles at all. Like sometimes we may chuck in like a bicep curl here and there. Same as like chest exercises. It will only ever be incline to make sure my delts are being targeted. I don't train quads. I think the only exercise where my quads are becoming engaged is like when I do the pendulum and leg press. Other than that, it's just glute and hammy focused.
Yeah. Yeah. You've still got like gnarly quads for someone that doesn't train quads.
They definitely are quad dominant, so they will come into play in a lot of exercise. But yeah, I don't remember the last time I've done a leg extension.
Like a leg extension. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's even one of the more kind of next level things of competing as well, because you are literally looking at your physique and being like, what does my glute ham tie look like?
Yes.
What does my posterior delt look like? All those little things. Whereas like when we see that sort of lifestyle client that's just like bit of upper body, bit of lower body.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, people are like, oh, a bit more focus on glutes, a bit more focus on hammies or whatever. But you really are on that next level of like looking at each individual muscle group.
No lifestyle client is just training delts on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know, like that's not really a thing that happens. Even like last off season, we kind of noticed that my lower body was growing quite a bit. My delts needed some bringing up. So I was doing 3 shoulder days a week and only 2 lower body days. Which like, again, like people are like, oh, but I want big glutes. But that actually helped me increase my training intensity on my 2 lower body days because I had a lot more energy to put towards them. I was recovered. I wasn't feeling sore, so I could train a lot harder on those days. So I probably equally got the exact same results as I would having 3 days a week.
Yeah.
That's what other people don't realize. I think they have to put so much volume into their programs and train glutes every day to make progress. But honestly, sometimes when you strip it back, you're actually going to make more progress.
Yeah. And we speak about that heaps on the pod as well, because I think a lot of people don't understand like rest and recovery and growth and how all that works. And it really is that mentality. I feel like that even goes back to that sort of like young F45 style training where you really are just like, the more I can go, the better shape I'll be in.
Yeah.
And the more, I think that's why I get so passionate about people really understanding nutrition and training, because when you do actually understand, like if I could just go send it on a really good quality session and then go into a wicked recovery phase and eat really well for me for a few days and then go back again. Like you said, you train legs, like if you get a really good quality leg session in on a Monday, if you're eating really consistently, you go back and do another good quality session on Thursday and you do that for a few months.
You're good to go.
That's fucking awesome compared to the person that's at F45 every day doing 1 million jump squats.
Yep. It's even doing like, let's say you want to train it 6 days a week. Okay, you can do that, right? If that's what you want to do and you want to move your body, sure. As long as you're having 1 rest day, I'm happy. But those 6 sessions, your 100% is not going to be there. You may as well honestly do 4 sessions per week because you're going to have a lot more energy. You're going to recover. People don't value how much recovery is important for training. Yeah. It is literally everything. If you're not seeing progress, it's probably because you're not recovering. Like you're not getting enough sleep. There is like such a big stigma around like resting and sleep quality as well. Like if someone's like, I've been so busy at the moment, I only got 5 hours sleep. I got up at 4 a.m. I'm like, have fun with that because that's not me. Like I'm literally like, I need 8 hours sleep. I'm stopping all work. I'm not setting my alarm this morning. I need to sleep in. It's not lazy. That is when I'm going to see most recovery and like most growth. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, it's like, you know, when people say, oh, what should I do on my rest day? Fucking rest.
Yeah, literally. 100%.
That's so funny. So I would love to know, like, what are the goals? Like, where do you want to go with bodybuilding and just everything in general?
My goal, I actually was being reflecting on this past week because people have been asking me that. I'm like, I actually didn't have an answer, but I do now. My goal is to turn pro as a natural athlete. I think that is a huge thing, and I almost want to prove to people that you can turn pro naturally. It's just going to take longer, and that is okay, and that's something that I'm like willing to do. And I also want to prove that to myself, because in bodybuilding you don't really realize how many people are taking performance enhancing drugs. It is insane, and I don't have like any opinion on it whatsoever.
I think it just depends on your like goals and plans and whatever.
Right, 100%.
Like you said, like if you wanted to compete against those girls, you'd be like, well, it's a no-brainer to do what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm like definitely not like against it. It might be something I do in like in the far future or whatever it is, but right now like my goal is to kind of reach my natural potential, and I definitely know that I have a few years like under my belt to keep pushing that as much as possible. So I want to do that, compete overseas, and then also prep my own clients to compete and make them enjoy the experience, because I love competing because my coach has made me love it. I think if you have the wrong coach, I've seen a lot of people, it's really taken away their love for the sport, their love for the gym, and I don't want other girls to kind of fall into that trap. So my biggest thing as a coach is for them to enjoy it as much as you obviously can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was going to be my last question is like, what would you say to someone if you've got like someone in their early 20s or anyone at all that's like out there thinking that they want to compete? What would your advice be?
Okay, my first one is going to be your why. Like there has to be a reasoning behind it, because when you are 20 weeks in, you have 4 weeks left to push plus like 2 extra comps. Like your why has to be so strong to keep you going and to not like miss a beat. And if it's not, it's going to be so freaking hard. And it doesn't take away from the days that will be hard, because no matter how strong your why is, you're still going to have those hard days, obviously.
Yeah.
But it needs to be so evident in your life that literally everything you do is with intention towards that why, towards that goal. It has to be for you. If you're doing it for your partner to look good, if you're doing it because your best friend's doing it, goddamn, you're going to have the worst time of your life. Like you have to want to do it more than anything.
Can I ask, as a little bit of a side note, I was going to ask this before. If we think about you doing a 20-week prep, straight up, do you ever fuck it up? Do you ever stray from the food?
No.
Yeah, I knew that was the answer.
Yeah.
I knew that was the answer. Yeah. And I just think that that's so cool to point out, because I think it's such a fine line and it completely depends on the person, the goals, what position you're in or whatever. But I think it's so normalized these days, that conversation of like consistency over perfection. And while that can absolutely serve some people, I think it's almost like, I don't know how to explain it, but like no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe Lily is for 20 weeks because she's got a really fucking awesome why and a big goal. And I think it's like making that okay as well. Like, yes, it's okay if you're a person who's day one and you're a bit lost and you're really trying to find your groove with nutrition and training. If you mess up on the weekend or you're doing some trial and error and whatever, if that's the position you're in, that's perfect.
Yeah.
But I always say to my girls as well, like even when we run the fat loss phase, I always say to people, if you're day one, you don't know what the fuck flexible dieting is, everything's overwhelming, confusing, meet yourself where you're at and like slowly ease into things, bring in one new habit at a time or whatever.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you've done this before and you know flexible dieting and you actually know everything we're teaching you, but you've come into this because you just want to fucking send it for 10 weeks, that's fine as well.
Yes.
Because I think that can sometimes get demonized where it's like, oh, but balance and lifestyle and all these things. That can be great at times. And like you said, you go on holiday and you have those different times in your life. But then you equally have times where you're like, this is my fucking priority. This is my goal. Everyone get out of the way. Yeah,
literally. And some people, like you said, there's no right or wrong, because some competitors who do extremely well, their diet breaks are like an off-track meal. And like at the end of the day, it's actually not going to do anything to your progress. If you were smart with that off-track meal and it's like you're going to sushi train or something like that, right? Rather than like Macca's or like having a full pizza, like you can still do that. But I think for me, the second you start to stray, then you actually start to become a little bit lenient on other things. It's like, oh, I'm only 100 steps behind like today. I may as well just get into bed. That's actually not going to do anything at all to your progress. What it is going to do, it's going to take a step back from your
effect.
Yes. Your discipline's not going to be as strong. Then you're going to be like, oh, it's only like 3 grams over on rice. It doesn't really matter. It does matter, right? Like you need to be on as much as you can. As soon as you start to like let yourself slip, it's so much harder to stay on track.
Yeah. And I actually said that to the girls in this round of the fat loss phase. I said to them, for me personally, I set myself a thing in July where I was just like, fucking perfect. Like no extra snacks, no nothing, no. And more so for the reason of like, I think people, if you put something in place, it's just like, this is the definite rule.
Yeah.
You can stick to that. The second you're like, oh, just 1 spoon.
Yes.
1 spoon of Nutella.
Yep.
Oh, just 1 missed gym session. Well, if it's 1, why not 2? Why not 3? Why not 4? And for me, I was just in that mentality of like, it's none.
Yeah.
It's just actually none.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think also people have the misconception in off season that it's like, oh, like you don't have to track. It doesn't really matter. I like still will track to the exact gram like now, because those habits that I'm building now are so much easier to keep in play in prep. If you completely forget every single habit in your off season, you're going to start prep and it feels like you have to start from square one again and you have to implement these habits and implement like this discipline and everything. I will literally not notice a difference between like the Sunday to the Monday to the day I'm starting prep to the day I'm in off season, because I'm still doing the exact same. Like Monday through to Thursday this week, I'm hitting like my macros to the gram. For example, my friends got noodle the other night and I took my meal prep. Then I said like no to Yochi the other day. I bought my meal prep to dinner. Little things like that, right? I don't see it as a big deal at all because it's my life and what I enjoy. And I don't think there's any restriction from my point of view because, for example, I'm going to Sydney this weekend and I won't track. Yeah. So I have that balance and you have that time where you can be on and off, but you need to be on majority of the time to achieve the goals you want to achieve.
Yeah, for sure. Love it.
Yeah.
I think I fully cut you off when you were saying about
no, it's so fine.
your advice.
Yes, there was one more thing.
Yeah.
That is finance. It is so expensive to compete.
Yes.
You have to have the money behind you. It is insane and I don't know why it's so expensive. It just is. The competing like side in terms of like coaching and stuff, like that's the stock standard, like how much it cost to have like a coach and go to the gym, but then you've got your pros and coach, which tends to be like mine was like $90 a fortnight, and then from there you've got your bikini, which you can hire, which is going to be so much cheaper. My first bikini was $500, my second was like $850, very expensive. Then
and some people go up even more than that.
Oh,
if they,
way
like,
more.
Bling them up.
Yeah, they go to like up to 1,000. Yeah, and then you've got your heels, and then you've got the comp day. Comp day, you have to buy a like membership to basically compete in that federation. Then you've got to pay to register for the comp. Then you have to pay per division. So the more divisions you do, the more it's going to cost.
I think we should start like a comp federation.
Oh, literally.
Membership and then registration and then divisions.
It's insane. And then from there, if you want photos on stage, you've got to pay per division what photos you want. Then if you want a video, it's on top of that as well. Then you've got your hair, your makeup, your tan. You've got 3 layers of tan you're getting. It is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say like definitely have like 5 to 10 grand depending how much you are, like how many comps you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is gnarly and just good for people to know about.
Just have your finances sorted before you go in.
Instead of, like you'll like do all the work and then you get to the week and you're like, I can't afford to register.
Literally. But I always think of it in like the 6 months leading up to it, you're not buying a single cocktail. You're not Ubering anywhere. You're not going out at all. So like you do save quite a bit of money.
It is essentially like your hobby and your lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's cool. Anything else?
I'm just trying to think. I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is just focus on you for everything that you do. And it has nothing to do with competing as well. Just lifestyle. Like if you want to go, like actually go and prove to yourself that you can do it. A lot of the times we say we want all these things and we always fall short, and you try a new coach, you try a new diet, you try a new protocol. But at the end of the day, it's just like that accountability. Like if you want to do something, prove to yourself you can do it and just go all in and do it. Like you can. The only person that's stopping you from achieving your goals is simply like you. So
I love it. I think a cool thing from like just watching you, like I love your social media and YouTube and everything. And I think everything you do, like it's like you're saying, everything's quite strict and it's weighed and it's timed and it's really on point. But I feel like you genuinely enjoy it so much.
Yes.
Like you don't do it from a restrictive place or a negative place or whatever. And even when you think about like taking a meal to a restaurant when all your mates are getting dinner, you're not like the miserable person on the diet in the corner. You're like, girls, I got goals.
Yeah. And I also wouldn't think twice about it. My meal's also probably at the moment more calories than they're eating for dinner.
Like I'm actually bringing my own meal because you guys don't give me enough rice.
Yeah, that's quite literally what it is. And people are like, oh my gosh, you're so healthy bringing meal prep. I'm like, my dinner is literally more than you're eating and I'm going home and having another bagel. So like, take a seat, it's fine. And people was like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm like, I want to do this. If I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't do it. Like I love this lifestyle. I like how it makes me feel. I'm so passionate about it. And I think that's why it's so easy I'm not gonna say like easy for me to compete, but I love it so much. My passion's there because I enjoy what I'm doing and I make it in a way that I do love it. Like I said before, you have the 2 parts of prep. Like the second half is a bit different than the first half. But the first half, I was traveling to Melbourne. I like went and saw Taylor Swift. I was going to Sunny Coast a lot of weekends. I just brought my meal prep with me. So I still made sure to live my life and not let prep like ruin my life essentially. So you've got to have that balance.
Yeah. We actually had Riley on the pod and she mentioned you at one point because we were just talking about sort of nutrition and everything. And she's like, my friend Lily, she was here for New Year's and anytime she didn't have her steps, we all went out skateboarding so she could get her steps.
I freaking love my friends so much. Like they helped me so much at that time. And for example, we went to New Year's, we went to a festival and I had water the whole time, but it's also environment because they all pretty much had water the whole time and they weren't even in prep. So it makes the biggest difference when your supportive network also kind of has very similar goals. They don't compete, but they love living that lifestyle and they're supportive no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing. Like if the people around you, I mean, I say this all the time, but if you had people around you that were like, why the fuck are you doing that? Like they wouldn't be around you.
No, and it gets
Get 'em
so
out.
annoying as well. It's like,
Yeah.
then you start second guessing, then you start hiding what you're doing, then you start saying no to things. Like, your environment is going to make or break your success in anything you do.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Okay, so social media is pretty much like Fit with Lily on anything with a double Y at the end. My last name is Richie, if you're not sure about that. No one really knows that. And then it's just Fit with Lily on YouTube as well. And I don't use TikTok, so I just scroll on that one. That's just for me.
No, I love your YouTube. I feel like your comp YouTubes and stuff are so good.
I know, I just need to get better at editing. Oh, I also have a podcast, which is called Raw Reality Podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify too.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And everyone can check out Lily. I feel like if anyone's listening to this and they want to get into the comp world, that's Lily's arena.
Yes.
So definitely hit up Lily, but just give her a follow. I feel like thinking about you doing another year of gains and then competing.
I'm so excited.
Like I said, guys, Lily's got fantastic glutes. Let's imagine them in another year.
I'm ready.
Watch this space.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. No worries. Thanks, guys.